what we're hearing from 49er fans is that most of you are not in that what I would call vocal minority. And I think that our show, and all of these shows, just Bay Area sports for the last 6 months, has probably paid more attention to the vocal minority than it has the silent majority. It's the vocal minority, I think, that's furious about Trey Lance. It's the vocal minority who believes Kyle Shanahan's butt is hot. And it's the vocal minority that thinks Brock Purdy is going to careen out of control back down to 7th-round draft status. I'm not saying any of those opinions are wrong. I'm simply saying I think that is a vocal minority. The silent majority believes Niners messed up, but it was right to move on. Kyle Shanahan's definitely the right guy for the job right now. Let's see where this all goes next. And we at least at some degree believe in Brock Purdy. What I think is what I'm sort of searching for now is not whether or not Brock is good. It's this delicate balance between why is Brock good? Is Brock Is Brock actually good because he is a skilled quarterback? Or
he's a system guy.
Is he completely a product of his environment?
I think that the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. And you can't be, and Sean Salisbury, who joined us last hour, gave a great answer to this because being a game manager is actually a very complimentary phrase because you have to be able to make the throws, make the layups, be able to read the defense, run the offense, and do what is necessary in order to manage the game. And if you're a game manager and you win, it's because you're able to do the things that quarterbacks need to do. And Sean made a great point about how few offenses actually cut it loose now and throw the deep ball like the old Al Davis Raiders he was talking about. The majority of quarterbacks are game managers, and the majority of quarterbacks are system QBs. And we all want to talk about Patrick Mahomes and underhanded and behind the back and falling down and a backhand flip and, oh, my God, all these highlight plays. But you watch Patrick Mahomes, and he's incredible at getting the ball, dissecting the defense, and making the correct throw. And that's what Brock Purdy does. So you mentioned, is he highly skilled or is he a system guy? Well, he's somewhere in between. And I think that as time goes on and he continues to win and grow and excel and succeed, I think it becomes more about his skill. But right now we haven't seen enough of him, in my opinion, to give him the benefit of the doubt.
I think you and Sean are right that a lot of these things are not the criticism that they sound like, whether it's game manager, whether it's product of system. I've always felt that about quarterbacks to a degree. The example I always use is Kurt Warner, who was amazing with the Rams, then a complete joke with the Giants, and then amazing again with the Cardinals. Your surroundings matter for every quarterback. And so whether that's from the levels of Tom Brady and Joe Montana all the way down to some of the people who we've looked at in the past as the quote-unquote game manager, the Brad Johnsons, the Dilfers, the Joe Flaccos, and everything in between, your surroundings matter. And if you do just make the right play instead of the amazing play, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
I guess where I get tripped up with Brock is when people seem to indicate that the ability to do those things, those don't count as skills.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm with you.
I'm just going to give the ball to Debo, and then Debo does all the work. Now Brock gets a touchdown pass out of that, and that's not – no, it is a skill. It's totally a skill. The whole thing has to spin together, and we've watched too many quarterbacks on too many teams not be able to get it done to say that delivering the ball accurately, on time, the right decision, those things are, if I were to make a list of important skills out of my team's quarterback, I mean, those are top 5 skills.
Sure.
Yes, you want strong arm, you want all the leadership, you love all those things. Improvisation.
Right.
That's all great, but
accuracy would have to be before that, right?
Accuracy is definitely top 5. Decision-making is definitely top 5. And then on time, delivery,
sure.
Like that kind of execution.
I would also add in like the actual game management, which is play comes into the headset, communicate in the huddle, get to the line, read the defense, audible if necessary, and then get the ball.
Organized.
Correct. Yeah. Like game management
Field
to me
presence.
is that. Yeah. Even before the ball is snapped, to be able to get the play, to dissect the call, to relay the call to your teammates, and then get everybody in the right spot, all in 40 seconds or less. That to me is where game management really comes in. And then the other skill that, Brock Purdy is lauded for, and he should be lauded for it because we've seen it now over 8 games or so. It's the ability to see it and being able to dissect it in real time. And that's, I think, a hard one for fans and even for those of us in the media, because you look at his draft position, his measurables, his college resume, the baby face, and all the rest of it. And it's easy to discount what he actually does that's a separation skill, and that is his ability to read and react and dissect plays and know exactly where he's supposed to go with the ball.
I can't wait to see this.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see this.
It's a fun one.
Well, listen, I will give credence to this, and I'm trying to remember. It might have been on our YouTube chat. It might have been Uncle Looney. Seeing a lot of you throw this stuff out there, but like the hardest regular season assignments that Brock Purdy has had in his career. Like, if you go to those 6 games that he played in the regular season last year, 5 of them were starts. I do think some of them, the hardest assignment for me, this is how I would answer that question. Like, obviously going to Philadelphia for the NFC title game, that's the hardest assignment. And you could either, depending on how you look at it, say he didn't get it done or he didn't get a chance to get it done.
Sure.
Right? So he gets knocked out of that one. Outside of that, I think the next one would be Dallas. It's a home game, but it's a playoff game against the second best defense in the league. And while he wasn't overwhelming, he was good enough, and he won. For me, though, if you go to regular season, his hardest assignment was the game he didn't start. His hardest assignment was when you are, not getting reps in practice, and you get thrown into a game when you've been QB3, QB2, you've never played in the NFL, and you get hucked into what was a high-level game between 2, I think 7-4 teams at the time against the Miami Dolphins, and you're trailing early 7-3. You were handed that game, and you outscored Miami 30-10 from the moment he came into the game. That was his hardest assignment. But if you want to talk about road trips and all of that, I get that you could put this right up there with the hardest things that Brock has ever been asked to do. This game coming up on Sunday.
Without a doubt. And I think it's because of the nature of week 1. And that's why I asked Sean Salisbury that about week 1. And he said, you just don't know. And you can work all off season, but you don't know what other teams are going to have for you. And they get all those weeks to prepare as opposed to, 4 or 5 days in a regular week. And so you don't know what other teams are going to throw at you. Miami last year, 8-3. Niners were 7-4 in that game in Santa Clara. So it was very anticipated, and you're right about, how difficult that was, but I kind of agree with you in terms of the toughness of this assignment because it's a 10 a.m. Pacific Coast time start, 1 o'clock out in Pittsburgh. It's not an easy assignment against a team that, many people expect to be better than they were last year, and Kenny Pickett, Kenny Two Gloves, as Sean was calling him, comes in hot. They took the preseason very seriously. They were undefeated, and the Steelers are expecting to be better than they were last year, and they ended last year on a bit of a roll. Now, there's no momentum from the end of a year to the beginning of another year.
Well,
but for the most, Kenny Pickett probably feels better now than he did last November.
Would you say that Detroit last night looked like they had momentum from last year?
That's a fair comp.
I'd
yeah.
argue that they do.
I don't know if it's momentum as much as it is confidence, and I don't know where you draw the line between the two.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh probably has a similar amount of confidence based on the way they ended last year, and I think Kenny Pickett won his last 5 starts or 5 of the last 6. I know he won his last 3, but I think he wound up winning 5 of 6 is the number that I think we looked at yesterday in terms of how he closed out the year.
The Pittsburgh Steelers last year, they did win their last 4 games. They were 5-8 and finished 9-8. They won their last 4 games at Carolina, home to the Raiders, at Baltimore, home to Cleveland. I will also say the way they won them, they grinded these games out.
Sure.
By the way, Pickett did not play in one of those games.
Right.
Trubisky played in those games. So if you're just looking at Pickett starts,
5 of 6, 5 of his last 6.
Yeah, actually, he's getting a loss against Baltimore, but he got knocked out right away.
Yeah, he gets the L.
Tough one. Started and finished. He won his last 5 in a row.
Right. And
his last 5 in a row.
And even though we talked yesterday about his TD to INT ratio, which was pretty meager, Mary T. Mahar, as I shout out great swimmers from the past, he still was able to quarterback in wins, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Only one good team on that slate. Only one good team.
Well, the Raiders.
The Raiders were not a good team.
The Niners had to gut one out against them, just like the Pittsburgh Steelers did.
The Steelers, that game was in Pittsburgh. They won 16-13 at Baltimore, but the other 4 teams were the Colts, the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Browns, all losing teams. And, Pickett, only once did he throw for over 200 yards in all of those games. So it's not to take anything away from him. It's just to let you know what the stats were.
But in terms of, team momentum, quote unquote, or team confidence. And then they go 3-0 in the preseason, which normally doesn't matter, but Pittsburgh was actually trying to win games this preseason.
Well, I look at it more just that Pickett looked good.
Right.
I don't really care if they won. I care how'd you look in that first quarter when your first team offense was in there, and Pickett looked good. This is a real opponent. I expect this thing to be really, really tough. But by the same token, the 49ers should have enough if they're playing at a high level. We'll give you what Shanahan said about Bosa's role in this game in just a little bit. But that's kind of been the evolution for me today, the evolution of the Brock Purdy conversation we're having, as opposed to just the poll of is he going to be really good, just kind of good, or not good. That's kind of the poll. I've sort of more morphed this conversation into, do you believe that Brock Purdy is a result of Brock Purdy or a result of the system? And I right now, while I acknowledge the answer is some of both, I know that, in fact, 100% of us should answer that question that way.
Sure.
But it's more about what's more in play here. Is it Brock or is it the team? And for me, I vote Brock. Not because I think he's a done deal or amazing or any of that. I just think that it's wild in the NFL to think that someone can do the things that he did solely because of their surroundings, or even mostly because of their surroundings. I acknowledge, you all know, I think Kyle's a phenomenal coach. Their roster is second to none. So I'll acknowledge all of that and grant you that Brock Purdy is blessed with where he ended up and the opportunity that was granted him. I acknowledge all of that. But quarterbacking in the NFL, I've never really seen it judged that way. I don't, we've watched so many quarterbacks come in and not do that to the point of high-level anger for the last 5 years about the way Kyle has handled the quarterback position. We're always mad about the quarterback. Then you have a guy come in, solidify, calm, steady, and we come out the other side and go, well, that's a product of the team. Wait a minute. It feels unfair.
Well, it takes time, I think, in order to shake that. And Tom Brady's a good example, because when he took over and he had that instant success, nobody was saying, oh, Tom Brady, most unbelievable quarterback ever. It took time for Tom Brady to grow and do it year after year to where people realized, wow, it's not just a system. It's not just Bill Belichick and no days off. This Tom Brady guy turns out is really good at being a quarterback. And I think Brock Purdy, while not having to be as good as Tom Brady, I think he has that same sort of proving ground timeline that any quarterback has, especially when you're in a system like this with so much talent around you and a head coach that is seen league-wide as being really, really good as an offensive play caller and an offensive mind. It's going to take time for Brock Purdy to do it and do it again and do it at a high level over and over and over. I'm not saying 10 years or 12 years, but in terms of the sample, so far it's a pretty small sample. So
for sure,
I would lean toward Kyle Shanahan and the system as a bigger factor in their success than Brock Purdy being really, really good. Now, Brock Purdy's good.
Yeah, it's totally fair to say let's wait and let that play out. By the same token, I guess if your answer is that Brock is more a product of a system than a product of his own gifts, his own talent, if that's your answer, I totally get it.
And it is.
But it makes me want to ask follow-up questions.
Go ahead. I'm here till 6.
Okay.
5:57.
So,
and it's Grandy time.
Why couldn't Jimmy do it at this level?
Well, Jimmy did.
No, he didn't.
Well, Jimmy did it at the level where he got to a Super Bowl.
But he
and
never.
Jimmy didn't have the same weapons for as long as Brock Purdy did.
Okay, that's a fair answer. But he had good weapons.
Sure.
Right? When they went to the Super Bowl,
right.
He had good weapons.
Jimmy did great. And I think Jimmy took them further than Brock Purdy's taken them. So in terms of
okay, that's a fact, but I think it's one that sort of falls outside the realm of what we're talking about. Like, did you ever feel that Jimmy looked the way Brock looked last year? Did you ever feel the offense looked like that under Jimmy Garoppolo?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But I'd have to look at all of the opponents that Jimmy had and, look at the tape. And this is not to say that Brock can't be or isn't already as good as Jimmy Garoppolo, but I don't think that Brock Purdy has shown that he's far better. Now, I know the offense had an uptick in terms of points scored and points per game, and we all want to look at that and say, well, I mean, they didn't do this under Jimmy, so it must be Brock Purdy was the difference. Well, the entire team was better. Christian McCaffrey was firing on all cylinders when Brock Purdy was there, and that was a big factor. And the team overall was playing better than they were earlier in the year when they were losing games.
And then I guess what about the rest of the guys? You know what I mean? From Trey Lance to C.J. Beathard to Nick Mullins to anyone else. Like, why didn't that work better? Well,
it worked better for them. Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard have never been as good as they were here in San Francisco.
Agreed.
So I think that's a vote for the system because Nick Beathard and C.J. Mullins have never gone on to do anything anywhere else.
I mean,
and I have to conflate their names always.
Nobody's going to dismiss the system as being effective, as being statistically friendly to a quarterback. That I will completely acknowledge. I guess my question is more about if we're going to make Brock feel sort of like, well, you're only a product of your surroundings, then why would other quarterbacks not have been able to lead the 49ers to more consistent wins? Well, and a more high-powered offense.
Sure.
Like even Jimmy at his height, you were often trying to win that game 24-17.
Right.
21-13.
Yeah.
You're trying to win that way. It doesn't look like that now.
I don't think that it's fair to say that they were only, or he's only a product of the system. And I don't want to discount the talent that Brock Purdy has, especially as it relates to C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins and Brian Hoyer, who was a quarterback here, and Gabby, and the other guys who have been here. I also do think you have to look at this offense now in a different light, even this offense now from when they got Christian McCaffrey versus before they had Christian McCaffrey. Because right now, this offense from a skill position player, the 5 eligibles, this might be the best 5 eligibles that they've had since the days of Steve Young and, post Joe Montana.
Yeah.
When they had T.O. and the end of Jerry Rice and the rest of those guys. These 5 eligibles are incredible, and Jimmy didn't have a lot of that. He had a few games with these guys, but Brock Purdy came in to an absolute embarrassment of riches in terms of skill guys.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.